Lap sync. Great.
We have to be high energy?
No.
Okay.
Hello, Alex Furnas.
Hello, Tommy, whatever your last name is.
Are you ready to be a YouTuber?
It's all been leading to this anyway.
It's not a midlife crisis. We're just making a YouTube video. You live long enough to become a successful director, or you
die.
Or you die. I was gonna say you become another white guy making YouTube videos about filmmaking. Hi, I'm Tommy Heffernan. I am a writer, director, shooter, and editor of short films, primarily 48-hour films. 48-hour film is where you have one weekend to write, shoot, and edit a short film. I've done about 30 of these, including the college ones, because I'm not well. You've done, I think, like half of those.
Half? I was gonna say maybe 20, I don't know.
Some in there.
I was trying to count them off, but it turns into a soup.
Well, after college, him and I started Gold Team, where we've made the majority of our stuff in the Seattle 48-hour film competition. We've gotten audience favorite, first place, second place. We've also gotten 3 honorable mentions in the Russo Brothers No Sleep Till Film Fest. They've done it 3 times, and we've been an honorable mention 3 times. We've learned a few lessons along the way.
And at this point, we're pretty much entitled to people's attention.
So really the 48 taught me it basically was my film school. And it saved me a lot of tuition on not going to film school.
If you spend a lot of time thinking about making things, it's a great way to kind of force yourself to finish making something, no matter how it actually turns out. Also, if you have a lot of experience, this is something that can show you how fast something can be made. Because the 48 is that's about as fast as it gets.
So I've compiled a list of 48 tips for doing the 48. It'd be fun to challenge ourselves to do it in 48 minutes, but I don't think we could try, but it's...
We'll see. Maybe you can edit the video into 48 minutes.
I'll just speed it up. Number 1, first thing, decide if you want to lead or join a team. And then number 2 kind of goes along with that, decide what role you want to perform. Working on other people's teams was never really a fulfilling experience for me. And at a certain point, I just didn't know any friends around here who were doing it. And so I was like, well, I'm gonna have to do it myself, I guess. I'm gonna get my friends together and do it.
As far as 48s go, the level of stress and responsibility that comes with being a team leader has never really appealed to me. Sometimes I really want to be creatively involved. I really want to be part of the brain trust. I really want to be writing. Other times it's cool to just hold the boom pole.
You know, you're gonna end up putting so much work and so many late hours into whatever role you're doing. I feel like you should definitely make sure that it's something you will enjoy doing. If you join a team and have a not so great experience, you can always join another one.
And sometimes it's like exposure therapy.
Yeah, exactly. You gotta jump into the shark-infested waters before you realize, hey, maybe I don't like sharks.
Or maybe the sharks are cool.
But maybe, yeah. My third tip is recruit people who will round out your team. There are all these people who post on Facebook, whether they're actors or crew members, posting hey, I want to join a team, specifically for the 48-hour film project. But if you're in sort of a city, there's probably a filmmaking Facebook group that you can find people in who are down to just work on other people's projects for free for the experience. The whole thing is a learning experience, right? So there are all these other people who are down to learn and experiment with you on this type of venture, even though it's not a paid opportunity.
Yeah. Well, and if it functions like film school, there's almost this kind of unspoken agreement on any 48 team that's nobody's getting paid because maybe it will turn out it was not worth anybody's time at all.
That's very true.
And if it is, that's kind of like a miracle.
Sometimes we get something that we can submit to festivals, and then other times it has been something that builds up our actors' reels. Literally,
yeah.
So many of the actors we worked with, I helped them edit their reels after, and it's oh, a lot of this is just our shorts that we made.
Yeah.
And if it shows a range, sometimes that's preferable over just oh, here are 3 commercials I did for Microsoft.
A 48, I guess, is probably a better deal than they would usually be. If they sign on for some short film that they're gonna be involved in for months, like peppered, like however many weekends, however many days, versus with a 48, the actor knows they're generally going to be like, there's just going to be one Saturday that they're going to have to be there for maybe all or part of it.
Yeah,
And
low commitment.
Yeah.
It is always.
Are you forbidden from paying people?
Yeah, actually, for the 48-hour film project, you are.
Okay,
And I think
okay.
for other competitions,
There you
that's
go.
probably the rules
You're
too.
actually forbidden from paying people
Don't
on the
do
48-hour competition.
But because that's part of the rules, another great thing to do is use as many of your friends as you can. You want to have people who you're going to enjoy spending the time with. You also want people who you're comfortable with and you know their boundaries, and you can be real with them and set an expectation of like, hey, like, this is what we're going to be asking of each other. And, you know, they don't come into it like expecting a different experience than they get.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
Also, when you bring in a professional, you should level set for them too. If you're just a couple of your friends and you're gonna around and make a 48, like, hey, let them know that ahead of time. Like, this isn't gonna be a big 16 to 20 person production. It's just me and my friends. Number 5, once you have your team together, just like start a group message. I feel like that's something that's basic and that always helps us get on the same page. And the Google Doc, specifically just having a shared document that we can like list out everyone's contact info and all the like props and stuff that we have access to and like our locations and stuff like that.
We really, and well, Tommy specifically really pushes himself and the rest of us to shoot a lot of stuff in a lot of different locations. And that ends up getting good results. And at the same time, there's a tricky balance. It needs to be very organized for that to work out. Maybe if you're doing something with just like your friends, you know, I've seen a bunch of 48s that's just like a couple of people in one house. And even still, I'm sure like having an organized Google Doc to keep track of who's available when.
Yeah, there's always going to be so much more work than you anticipate in the week or two leading up to doing a 48. Like, it's kind of like a part-time job, just like once you realize all the little details that you have to sort out between people. Speaking of details, locations. Now, this isn't a rule of thumb, but I feel like usually we try to book at least one cool location. We can kind of write around this, and like if it's one spot, then like at least we know we have somewhere to film, as opposed to there are other times that we don't do that, and that most of the time works out too. But
it ends up being filmed here.
Yeah, here or at any of our other apartments or houses, or just on the streets.
We still never filmed at my house.
That's true.
It would be loud. It's probably not a good idea.
Yeah. Cat would get in the way.
I mean, if you can find a place for free that looks good, that's ideal. If you gotta, we're not forbidden from paying for Airbnbs. 'Cause,
No, we've done that several times. You are allowed to rent an Airbnb.
Okay, we do not break the rules. We take them very seriously. Where was the retreat? What town?
The retreat with Clay Ellum.
Beautiful Clay Ellum, Washington. Or you have like a f***ed up warehouse full of asbestos. Should we be swearing in this?
Yeah.
If you have a f***ed up warehouse full of asbestos, sometimes it can be very inspirational.
Yeah. Number 7, only rent the gear you need. There have been times in the past where I'll rent just a bunch of stuff we might be able to use, and it's like, oh, I spent like $100 or $200 extra dollars on stuff that we really did not need. I wouldn't say that the 48 is a great place and time to experiment with equipment that you've not used before, because you're usually strapped for time. If you want to do that and you plan for it, sure. But for us, we really just like to keep it to what we're comfortable with.
A lot of our 48s end up with this sort of like handheld run and gun style to them that I think actually works very well. And we just get the most out of like the quickest schedule possible.
The last thing you can do before the 48 actually starts is you can come up with ideas you have for each genre. If it's the 48-hour film project, you'll have a list of genres on the website that you can look up that you could possibly draw from. You can look at that list and come up with ideas for what you would do for each of them, as long as you aren't writing a script yet. That's where you would break the rules, but
yeah, sometimes, you know, you might have an idea that you get lucky and it fits with the genre you get. Sometimes you just have to give up on that.
Yeah, usually I'll have like, 8 to 10 different ideas going in, and it's like I'm never attached to one specifically.
I am sometimes attached to one specifically, and that was the Fingernail Taker.
Yeah, you were attached to that one.
I was pretty attached to that.
Okay, so when the 48 starts, first thing you do is write. My first tip is to decide how many people you're going to include in the writing process, because just speaking from our experience, there is such a thing as having too many cooks in the kitchen. And you, at the end of the day, do want one person who's gonna make the final call as far as the direction that you're gonna head with. We usually have no more than like 4 or 5 people who kind of brainstorm.
For the brainstorm, yeah.
Yeah.
You just don't want to end up in the position where it is past midnight on Friday night and you still have not settled on an idea. We've been there, and it like it casts like a dark cloud of doom over the whole weekend for me personally.
Well, that leads into my next point perfectly, which is structure your writing time. We outline until like 10 or 11 p.m. And then we, at that point, like once we're settled on an outline by then, reach out to actors and designers. Hey, this is what your character will be doing, or hey, this is what we'll need you to design. And also, most importantly, just like a rough outline of the schedule by that point that we have.
Yeah, we know what scenes are going to be filmed and where, so we can actually work the schedule out. And then usually sometimes Tommy will just go out and bang out the script, sticking pretty closely to the confines we've set for ourselves.
Number 11 might conflict with something we just said, but you do want to take your time to brainstorm. And I say this because you don't want to attach yourself to the first idea you come up with. Like, I feel like the first idea we come up with generally is the one that
is sort of a throat clearing.
Well, it's the one that, you know, another team could most easily also come up with.
Yeah,
and forcing ourselves to explore a few different paths usually leads to something that's a little more original or less expected. Sometimes we go down one path for like 30 to 60 minutes. We thought it might sound good as a group at the start, but once we like actually flesh it out and talk more about it, where it's like,
yeah,
we don't all feel 100% on this. And it's okay to throw that away if you still have time to start from scratch and build something new up.
There's a balance you got to strike, of course. The really good idea will only come after like you've been working at it for a little while.
Number 12, I'm gonna say don't get caught up in the details. And what I mean by that specifically is you just need the broadest general beats of your outline before you start writing the script, in our case. I mean, everyone has a different creative process, I guess. This scene does this to move the plot forward. It takes place at this location. Like, we don't talk about like types of shots or like the dialogue or stuff like that. It's more just how does the plot move through, and it's kind of like, I guess, a paragraph version of the short.
Again, only getting as detailed as you have to get to be able to tell the actors and the crew where and when you're going to be shooting what.
Yeah. Number 13 is try and subvert the genre you get. So most of these competitions will give you a genre to work from. Whenever we get a genre, trying to think of what our new or like unique or like unexpected idea in that genre might be.
Our genre with Magic Mac, we got fantasy.
Yeah. I guess that's an example.
Pretty early on, we figured out that we could make it about like a failed magician who becomes a real magician, right?
Yeah. But I guess sort of taking the mockumentary angle with this is something that we thought, oh, I've not really seen that in like a fantasy context before.
We've dipped into that well a couple of times, the mockumentary format.
You should ideally try to work in your other elements like character or prop or line of dialogue. I feel like we try to make an earnest effort to work those in meaningfully.
Usually.
It doesn't always work out, but
sometimes
do your best.
We have gone into it a couple of times, kind of just throwing that to the wind and just like wedging those in wherever we can afford to.
If you have like a really great idea for your genre, but it doesn't fit your other prompts as well, I'd say just go for the great idea. Like at the end of the day, don't let the prompts get in the way of telling the best story you can come up with that at least loosely fits all your elements.
There are, of course, teams that they just made it Attack of the Killer Umbrellas and then Attack of some other killer thing, whatever that was.
Oh, no, it was, so they, Film Vandals, their team set out to, for each horror competition, they were like, we're gonna make our prop the horror gimmick of this short.
Yeah.
Like, it was Attack of the Umbrellas, and then it was like Attack of the Killer Kites, and then it was Attack of the Sponges. And like,
yes.
You know, that's a fun way to include your prop.
Yeah, in a way, it's almost the perfect. They've got it down to a science.
Okay, so number 14 is about character. Just make your characters interesting to watch, and I feel like that is kind of like a screenwriting 101 thing. And there's so much about screenwriting that we could dive into, but we're not gonna. But at the very least, making an entertaining protagonist and someone you'll enjoy watching over the course of their arc, and giving them an arc that takes them to enough of a different place than they were at the start of the film that it's unexpected and sort of satisfying. A lot of the teams sometimes fall into the trap of like, we have these themes we want to talk about.
Yeah.
And the themes aren't really enough unless you do have like a story that is engaging.
Putting theme first can be kind of shooting yourself in the foot. And I mean, that's an overall screenwriting advice thing. We tend to get a lot of mileage out of making something that's about just a particular quirky or delusional character of some kind.
Yeah.
And alternatively, you can make something that is, if you have a big cast, and it makes more sense to kind of equally weight a lot of the actors you're working with, you can make a variety of very colorful characters and sort of an ensemble, which is what we did with this one.
There is the ensemble approach. Maybe we have like 6 to 8 characters. In most of these, you're really only going to be able to develop like 1 or 2 of your characters. Yeah. So as long as you make the rest distinct in their own way, that gives the actors a lot more.
The actors will appreciate that.
Yeah.
Even if they only have like 1 or 2 scenes or lines.
Give them something good for their reel.
Yeah.
That's the least you could give them.
Give myself something good for real in this one anyway.
Oh yeah, you got your hands ripped off in this one. Number 15, write to what you have, keeping your cast in mind, keeping your locations in mind, your props. Like basically just write to the strengths and write to the things that might be unique about your resources. In this one, we had Piper, who was a great child actress and really funny. And she is also like a gymnast, like ballet.
I think it was behind the scenes on this one, actually, I'm pretty sure. She was doing that like backwards spider crawl randomly. And I guess,
that's how we learned about it?
Yeah, well, that's how I learned about it. That stuck in my mind.
Well, yeah, this one, we actually have her at the end do the whole backbend thing.
Yeah.
I'm just a robot.
Number 16, schedule while writing. Figuring out your schedule as you're figuring out your outline is really important. You need to think about the logistics of like how long it's actually gonna take to make the film. I mean, a lot of the time that for us helps craft the story too. It's like, okay, we can't write something that's gonna have all these different locations.
Or at least have some semblance of like, okay, you're gonna shoot in an alleyway. There are some alleyways around. You're gonna shoot at the waterfront. There are places next to the water.
I would also say budgeting yourself a little extra time than you think you'll need. Very good practice, because things can always take longer than you expect them to.
Things will always go until 2 a.m.
They rarely take shorter, unfortunately. Number 17, figure out your set piece. And what I mean by this, again, kind of like writing to your strengths, writing to your resources. Figure out at least one cool thing you can do with this short and kind of like set aside time and energy for that.
Yeah.
Like with this, I would say it was really like production design and makeup.
Oh yeah, this was the only time we had Duncan and
Brandon
on set. The way I define this particular short, Die Scream Hate, is it's just hitting a bunch of action figures together. Like every single character is from a different setting, functionally, because we have all these resources from this prop company.
Yeah, basically we were looking at the list of all the props and costumes that these guys had for us to use, and we're able to like come up with all these diverse characters, like as far as like an army guy and a robot and whatever you are in.
Like Witchfinder General.
Sure.
But it was interesting in this case because when you talk about a set piece, or a lot of the time it's like a moment or a scene or a payoff.
And I do think like in a lot of our films too, it's like we'll save it like for one specific scene that we'll like want to take extra time to shoot, and like we'll build up, usually as an ending is like, oh, we'll build up to this really cool moment. But you know, it can be, hey, you know, I've never made like a drama set all in one room. Sort of a gimmick about your film. Not in a derogatory way, but just like
a conceit.
Yeah, an easy elevator pitch, like, oh, this is a cool film in which this happens. Number 18, leave the script open to revision. The first draft of the script is always going to not be as good as the second draft. A second draft is a luxury in these things, but if you don't have time to set aside like an hour in the morning to like sit with your actors or your co-directors and like go through the script and revise it, I at least leave room open for like, oh, ad lib in this section. Or like, I know that when I get to set with the actors and we're going over and rehearsing the scene, like if they want to change up the dialogue, then it'll probably be for the best.
Yeah, generally. It's generally good to keep an open mind about, does the actor want to change some wording or change an entire line for some reason? Or do you randomly decide you want to change an entire line because it might sound better some other way? On set, I think for 48s, that's almost inevitable that stuff like that is going to happen.
Yeah, and just try to get some sleep that first night if you're the writer, especially if you're going to be on set doing stuff the next day, which I usually always am. You know, you don't need to storyboard out every shot if you're comfortable with like letting your director or your DP kind of like improvise on the day. Number 19, shooting. We're to the part where you make the movie.
Right.
Wow.
I'm gonna leave. This is your department.
Oh no.
No.
Well, number 19, first and foremost, respect people's, what the f***? Number 19, first and foremost, respect people's time. And maybe that's another one that doesn't need to be, but I think it should be restated just because it's something that we often still try to do our best to do, but sometimes things just get out of hand.
We try, and it still falls through. So if you don't at least try, it can be a nightmare.
Simple stuff, just like not calling your actors earlier than they need to be.
Good example, though.
Yeah, this is I wanted to mention
gentleman,
this.
Kawan.
We had a shot that we wanted to get with him in the morning, in the makeup and costume and everything. We didn't have anything else to shoot with him until the very end of the shoot.
I can't believe you've just been chilling this entire time.
I've been going over my life.
And in hindsight, we probably didn't need to get this bit in the morning. We probably just could have worked that into the end of the shoot.
Yeah, ultimately,
That was a learning moment.
The time we saved by shooting that early on was entirely put on Kawan's shoulders. So,
Yeah, he was just sitting
so to
around
speak.
for 8 hours in costume.
But what
and makeup.
a role. Anyway.
What a defining role. The role of a lifetime. And then, yeah, also arranging your shoot so that you can let people go earlier in the day as opposed to later in the day, if possible. Trying not to go longer than 12-ish hours. I feel like usually we end up at like 12 to 14.
You want to try and imagine as if it was like an actual industry thing. Like, you know, imagine you were working with unionized employees.
Yeah, well, yeah. Number 20, leave yourself time to load in and out. It usually takes us like an hour to start shooting once we load into somewhere. And usually takes us like half an hour to load out of shooting. And also traveling between locations, like, because, you know, with traffic, if you're shooting around a city, that can take much longer than you think sometimes, so build that in. Number 21, rehearse the scene with the actors. Again, should seem obvious, but actors really appreciate when they know what they're doing, right?
Yeah, when they
have time to
get a little
sit
in.
down and read the lines. And if you're a director who wants to shoot the rehearsal and just like not waste any second, like, okay, that's one way to go about it. But for us,
but we'll say it does make sense when you're doing a 48.
it's true.
More power to you.
For us, though, we usually will get some of that work out of the way before we start shooting, because if you just let the actors run through the scene like 2 or 3 times, you can give them notes on performance. You can figure out your blocking and where the camera's gonna be when, so that you only have to do like 2 or 3 takes when you shoot it. Number 22, always do a take for safety. As shooter and editor, there is always something that can be better about a second take as opposed to the first take. Even if you think the first take was perfect, there might be like a car in the background, or someone moved in front of a light, or like a sound.
Audio makes a weird popping noise or
The
something.
focus could be off, or the actor just does something the second take that you didn't expect and is better. So always do one for safety. Unless you're down to like minutes. In this one, we did a lot of one takes at the end of the night because we had 30 minutes to shoot like 2 pages.
Yeah, well, and originally like 4 or 5 pages.
Yeah.
That was another example of revising the script on set.
Speaking of running out of time, number 23, always keep an eye on the clock. It's another one that we continue to try and get better at.
And it's good. It's very good to have at least one person on set who's gonna be on your ass about what time it is. Shout out to Alex Johnston and Taylor Van Duzer, who have typically been our hard asses about that.
They're basically our ADs.
Yeah, I mean they're ADs and script supervisors
And production designers and gaffers. And
yeah.
Number 24, let the actors contribute to the scenes. This is kind of just a note on like directing actors, I guess, because I come from a theater background and I was an actor for a couple years before I started getting into writing and directing. If you give them a line read, if you just tell them, no, just say it like this, like saying the line to them, it's like, it's a little disrespectful, but more it's just like, you're not giving them room to do what they do, their craft.
It's like you're not asking them to act, you're asking them to recite, to sort of transcribe vocally something you're giving to them.
Being less prescriptive and more sort of speculative, like, okay, that was a good take. Maybe let's try one that has more of this emotion. Also giving the actor an opportunity to like do one for themselves. Like, okay, hey, I've gotten like 1 or 2 takes of how I want it. Ask them, are you good if we move on? Or do you want to do another? Do you want to try it different?
I mean, it's good to foster a set where the actor feels comfortable asking for that, even if you don't offer it.
Yeah, you can always too get variations of like, okay, this one's a little closer to what I want, this one's a little closer to what they want. You can decide later and edit. And a lot of the time, they're right. Number 25 is a technical note. Always have someone monitoring sound. Now, you would think that's obvious, but I have done a few of these where it was literally just me holding the camera and they had mics on and it was going into camera, but I didn't have headphones on the whole time. I just prayed that the sound was coming out good. And that's very risky, especially when you're using lav mics because there can be so much rustle and noise. Make sure you have someone who's listening to it and can call out if a take is unusable and you need to do it again, or if there's like a noise in the background or something like that. And definitely use time code. I recommend that. If you don't know what that is, that's probably like a separate video.
You can ask OpenAI.
Number 26, shoot coverage so you have flexibility in the edit. This is another thing that I have learned shooting and then being forced to edit my own stuff, is that sometimes I'll get pinned into a corner where I only have 1 or 2 takes of something and we didn't get coverage. And especially in a 48-hour film where your film has to be under a certain time limit, it's usually 7 minutes for these, but for the Agbo competition and for a few other ones I've done, it's 3 minutes. So you really could screw yourself there if you have a long take and you don't have a way in or out of it with an insert or a reaction shot or any sort of trick.
You're not gonna be David Fincher.
If you have 2 cameras, that can be useful. Not really necessary, I would say, a lot of the time, but if you know you're gonna be doing a lot of shot reverse shot conversation between 2 actors, it can save you a lot of time. Or there have been rare times where we've been able to shoot 2 different scenes at 2 locations. Yeah. We did that on the Noir, where I was out on a boat and you guys were still in the house.
You can sometimes have a second unit going on.
Yeah, that's pretty advanced. But whatever you do, just try to have a light coming onto this side of their face, like I have expertly done for this YouTube video.
Get the blue and orange on them.
Yeah. Blue and orange or red and blue, bisexual lighting. Do they still call it that? Is that politically correct? Or
they just call it euphoria lighting now.
Euphoria lighting.
Yeah.
Cool. Number 27, be open to the better idea. Again, not being too attached to your idealized version of how a scene is gonna play out. If something happens and everyone is jazzed on it and agrees that, oh, this is actually cooler, a lot of the time they're right, and I would recommend going with that. And also, it's like, we were talking about with the Fingernail Taker too, it's like, by the end of the night, we kind of just ran out of time to do the whole ending that we had written.
Yeah.
And we kind of just had to adjust on the fly. It still ended up being a great ending.
Ended up
It went to a
hitting
lot
the
of
right
festivals.
hitting the right notes.
I would say also, if something isn't working and you're just trying it over and over, just like switch it up, try something else, give a different note. If you're trying to get a specific type of shot where like the camera's moving and doing all these things and it's not working, just split it into 2 shots, you know. You don't have all day. Number 28, feed the people. You can't pay them, but you should feed them.
It's good to have kind of like a lunch plan
Yeah.
of some kind, or like a lunch break worked into the schedule.
If you can have someone who can go pick it up, or if you can get it delivered to set, that'll save you time. So do that. Number 29, make sure you beat golden hour. Don't start doing a scene when it's light out and then not take into account the sun setting, which sometimes we have failed to do. It does happen.
A lot of it depends on the season.
And number 30, lastly, with the shoot, if you have paperwork to sign, don't forget to sign everyone's paperwork. Not everyone is going to be available on the Sunday. You should get it from them on the Saturday while you have them there.
As someone wraps, as someone's about to leave, it's like, no, we're not letting you go yet. You got to sign this paperwork.
Or get it from them at the start.
That even better.
Even
but
better.
have we ever done that?
Maybe like once or twice. Okay, now we are into editing, which is my shit. So now you could leave if you want.
Yeah, I guess so.
Number 31, create a project file beforehand. That for me has been a recent one that I've started doing because you can prep your credits a little earlier before you start shooting maybe. And it'll also just help you stay organized when you're editing, however late into the night you're editing. Number 32, this is my first thing I do whenever I start editing, is just sync up all of the footage. It's the number one thing you want to do, because if you start editing without all the audio and video synced up, assuming you're recording your audio and video separately, which a lot of the time we do, because if you're recording with an audio recorder, you're gonna get better audio quality than if you're just recording a camera. If you start editing before you sync everything up, it's gonna be a pain once you have your edit assembled, going and finding all the audio and placing it in. So just do it first, get your time code sorted, use pluralize if you have to. I don't know if you can still get that legally, but I never got it legally in the first place. I think I pirated it. So if you can pirate pluralize, do that. Or just use time code. Time code's killer. Number 33, make your timeline 24 frames per second or 23.98 frames per second. I don't necessarily think there's an advantage between those two, but I do know that whenever I see a film that's shot at 30 frames per second, it just looks really cheap. And that is the easiest thing you can do, even if you shot in 30 frames per second, is just make the timeline 24 and it'll look like a movie.
You're not James Cameron.
Yeah, don't do Hobbit or Avatar shit.
Or the way of the water. The wave of water.
So number 34, the next thing I do is build my assembly, and the assembly just meaning like your first take at putting the film together with all of the things that you shot. And usually how I'll do that is I will just get all the takes of each shot. Sometimes I'll like trim the heads and tails off to like just have the action itself, so I can watch them back to back and compare like, okay, which take do I actually like the best? Which one's in focus? Which one is the performance best in? Yada, yada, yada. Number 35, try to stay awake. It's hard for me to recommend that you do as many rolls as I do, as far as staying up almost all night writing, and then being the person to shoot the film throughout the whole shoot, and then staying up all night editing.
Tommy takes 5 years off his life every time we do one of these, I think.
Yeah, I've got like till 40. If you were on the shoot all day, I would just recommend like maybe take a 2 to 3 hour nap at some point. Like I've done that on accident a few times and it's been okay. At least set an alarm, because if you sleep too much, you're gonna screw over your team. Number 36, once you have your assembly, review that and then do your polish. Cut your assembly down to whatever time limit you need, if it's 7 minutes or 3 minutes or whatever. And then once you have a second draft you feel good about, then go through and like touch up the audio, make everything sound nice, touch up the color, like adding graphics and stuff that you're missing. Number 37, regarding music in your film, having a composer, great option. Having a music library, also a valid option for the 48. And that might be a little controversial, but as helpful and amazing as it is having a composer for your 48, or for your short film in general, like especially when you're doing a horror short, like that's when I feel like we've benefited the most from having a really great composer.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's the one time we really had a composer.
That's the one time we've kind of done it and it worked out. And I think it's just because we successfully managed to get our composer like 6-ish hours to do the score. The bigger issue with a 48 is that if you work with a composer, you really only have 1, maybe 2 takes at the music. And for me at least, there's so many different tones of music that you wouldn't necessarily think would work under your scene, but actually add a lot to it.
Yeah, well, I mean, and in a couple of these, I mean, you want like such drastically different music from scene to scene. Composing a score is a long and arduous process. And it's one of the things that, I mean, composers who actually busted out for a 48, and Nathan Towns, the guy who did our horror ones, I mean, in that case, what we were going for was like more of an overall soundscape. Like, and the tone was pretty consistent from start to finish.
Hey.
It's incredibly hard, and the result you're gonna get is not gonna be anywhere near the result you'd get if you had a composer working for you for like a month or 2.
Yeah, exactly. I would never want to put a composer in the position of like asking them for that work and then like throwing out that work, because it turns out it doesn't really align with what I want. So that's why a lot of the time I'll go to sound libraries. I would also say, as far as music goes, you don't need it playing constantly under your short. I feel like a lot of shorts are undercut by it just being music beginning to end and not letting it breathe in silence.
If you have like a comedic scene and you have all this Mickey Mousing, you might as well have a laugh track. If you've got like this really sad scene and it's just like being drowned out by this like saccharine piano melody or something, sometimes that can just be...
If you're doing a comedy, for the love of God, just try to avoid like the
xylophone
strings, like,
shit. The fucking... Oh my God.
Kevin MacLeod-esque shit. Aside from a composer, 2 very helpful but not always mandatory roles you could have in post are bringing on a colorist and bringing on a sound editor. Obviously, for a short film, you would want both of those things. They can add so much, because those are 2 very specific roles that me as an editor, like, I know enough to get by doing a 48, but whenever it's been like, okay, now let's like prepare something to be shown in a theater, it's always gonna look and sound so much better with a professional. If you don't have time to bring those 2 people on, maybe just throw on a multi-band compressor in Premiere. I don't know what it is in Resolve, but something similar. And for color adjustment, an adjustment layer with a little LUT can go a long way. I mean, actually, this one is funny. This one we turned in with a really washed out color grade, because
it was rough.
I basically turned in a version that I threw an adjustment layer on, but the LUT was like not a LUT that like took full advantage of the range of color and light that we got. So look at your Lumetri scopes. You know what I'm talking about. Make sure that it actually is filling the gamut. Number 39, you've done your assembly, you've done your music, you're working on your color and your sound. This is when I would recommend you review with anyone on your team if anyone wants to take a look at the edit in progress and give you any notes. A lot of the time for us, that's kind of a luxury on a 48. Number 40, at this point, make sure all your paperwork is being uploaded. Again, if you gotta deal with paperwork, that's something you do not wanna forget until the very last minute. So either like upload it while you're rendering stuff or have someone else on the team handle it. Number 41, do a safety export at least an hour before you turn in. There's so many little technical things that can go wrong for no reason that are just terrifying. It is always good to have a version, something that you can turn in at the very deadline if you need to. Number 42, watch it back on as many different screens and listen to it through as many different audio sources as you can. I mean, this one, it's like, I probably was looking at it on one screen and it looked fine on that screen. And that's the other thing with audio too. It's like, you can be listening through headphones and it can sound like one thing, then you play it back on speakers and it sounds entirely different. Especially once you've exported it, just making sure that there's no like glitches or anything, because you're definitely gonna notice those glitches on a 100-foot screen at the theater.
Yeah.
So, and number 43, after you've turned it in, you did it, you did it, share it with your crew. I've heard recently that directors will not send their crews their films until the premiere, and I don't get that.
Everyone's waiting with bated breath. Everyone is waiting all Sunday to know how did it turn out.
Yeah,
and
let them know you turned it in the second you turn it in.
Oh yeah.
And then B, yeah, why not just send them the film, let them see the fruits of their labor. Obviously, it's not going to be your perfect version. There's always something to be improved upon in a director's cut after the fact.
Of course.
But, you know, people will understand. Just show them some sort of reward for their work that they gave you. Okay. Post 48. We're not even done yet. I mean, we are done. We turned in the film. But I still have more advice.
You can stop watching the video here and fall asleep just like we do.
I have more white noise for you to fall asleep to. Number 44, go to the screenings. If you're doing one of these competitions that is in your town and does have a screening, go to it. That is half of the reason I feel like we do these, is the joy, and I mean, sometimes also the
humiliation.
Number 45, take note of the other films that you see. Again, this is like half of the value. This is like the film school part of doing the 48, I feel. Watching the other films, seeing what worked about the ones that are really good, and thinking, how can I bring that sort of thing into my process? Seeing what didn't work about the ones that you don't like, and knowing, oh, those are things that I'll avoid making my next film.
And feeling better about yourself.
And being able to see both of those things in your film as well, and sort of accepting it for what it is. I mean, especially if you're doing a comedy for us, it's always tough seeing like who's gonna laugh at what, and like when something doesn't get as big of a laugh at one screening, it gets a bigger laugh at another screening. It's like, oh, what does this mean?
Yeah.
But it's all part of like, at the end of the day, it all contributes to sort of building your own sensibility and your own like quality control meter as a filmmaker. That's something that you only get by seeing your work with an audience, and that's half of the value of doing the 48.
It is supremely anxiety-inducing, but kind of essential.
Necessary for growth.
Yes.
If you see a film that's really good, like, oh wow, the shots in that were amazing, or wow, that actor crushed it. Mm-hmm. Take note of those people in the credits and maybe
poach them.
Yeah, say hi to them at the end of the screening. Follow them on Instagram. Like, this is the networking, and everyone hates to say networking, but that is another huge value of doing this. Is it's a social event. We started this, and I knew maybe 3 or 4 friends that we had on Tundra, and the other half of the people were new people I was meeting that day. They went on to be people that I worked with for like 5 years now. And all the people that I've met as a result of that has just been like building block after building block of like, okay, do one film, bring on some more people, do another film, work with some more new people. And that's how you get to the point where we have like a rotating carousel of like 20-ish people who are gold team. Number 46, assuming that there are awards in this competition, because usually there are, don't expect to win them. It's okay if you don't.
Don't get too caught up in that. What you should base your impression of your work on is how the audience responds to it. Like, you'll know in your gut, is the audience liking this? Are they enjoying this? If you don't get certain awards, it's okay. I mean,
You will survive.
It's nice to get awards. The recognition is very nice. Don't plot on the downfall of the people who did win awards.
Speaking of plotting on downfalls, Furnas, if you don't win an award and you're upset that you didn't win that award, don't go up to the judges and complain that you didn't win that award.
Yeah.
That's something that I've seen happen at a local level, but also with the Agbo Russo Brothers competition.
Oh,
People flood the comments of the winning
the
film.
YouTube comments.
Yeah, and are like, this is the film that won, really?
It's
Like,
crazy. It's crazy. Well, because those people, you can always see the Agbo thing was interesting because it opened up this 48-hour format to so many people who had never done anything like that before, and you know who those people are because they never sat through a 48-hour award screening where they felt completely snubbed and had to just kind of eat it and accept it and move on with their lives.
I mean, it's like, it's the same thing as the festival circuit too. It's like, it's always a crapshoot.
Yeah.
There's so many entries. You never know what specific thing is going to click with the judges. And every panel of judges is different and has different
There's a million different factors, like, and you don't want to go into a 48 hoping for certain awards is what I would say, or like trying for certain awards.
Well, I think you can try, but my advice is just don't expect you're actually gonna get. Like,
Don't
you know,
let that be your make or break goal. I
yeah,
suppose.
if you're doing this to win the award, then maybe you should like step back a little bit, because you should do it because of everything else we've talked about. The value of like building your network and getting better at making films.
Don't do it to
and having
collect.
fun.
Don't do it to collect laurels.
Yeah, no, totally. But laurels are pretty to put on a reel.
Laurels are nice to put on. Yeah, they're very nice to put on a reel.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know about that. I don't have any reels.
Aw.
I do actually have a reel. 6 likes on YouTube.
Nice. Number 47, send your film to other festivals. And this ties into the last thing because, hey, you know, you didn't win awards. I mean, the Fingernail Taker, we won one award, which was Best Scream.
Yeah, that's right.
And then we submitted it to a bunch of other festivals, and it got into a lot of them and won awards at those festivals, which I never would have expected.
And it, honestly, I mean, at the 48 screening itself, I don't think there was that strong of an audience reaction to it, as far as I remember.
Yeah,
versus
it was kind of tepid, I think.
yeah. But then at a lot of these other screenings, people were going crazy for it.
Yeah, there have been other ones where people like make a point of coming up to us and saying that they love that film. So, you know, it.
Got a shit ton of YouTube views.
Another piece of doing these is that it gives you something to take around to festivals, and you know, it doesn't just have to die with the competition itself. The organizations that run these competitions are like, yeah, take it to wherever you want to take it. We had one that got into SIF, which is absolutely crazy because we shot it all in my car and we made it for no money.
There you go. Sometimes less is more.
Yeah.
Such as that one that won Agbo and pissed off a lot of people. The guy with the pen.
Well, actually, the year after that, and that
Yeah.
one also pissed people off, and it was just like a phone screen, kind of like animated.
Just these minimalist approaches. I mean, that's an entirely different point.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to go big. Only go big if you really want to do it for yourself. That's just its own separate point. Number 47.5.
And number 48, if you don't succeed at first, try and try again.
That's so true.
Because I have done like 30 of these things. We have done close to 25 of these things. The first one that I did right before you came on, Tundra in 2019, it got like 6 different awards, like second place, audience favorite. And I was like, what the fuck? And on a certain level, it was really encouraging and really cool. But I did kind of after that have to remind myself that that's not gonna be every time. Like the time after that, we got disqualified because we got the line wrong.
Yeah.
And there have been times where we didn't even make the turn in time because we were shooting till 5 a.m.
Yeah, I think-
Last year we did that.
Yep. It was nice that happened like more than 20 of them in, because it would have been devastating a couple of years beforehand.
And the more of these we do, it's like the more we understand how hit or miss it can be.
Yeah.
And to not put all of our eggs into one basket, like if this one time doesn't do well, it's gonna, be everything to us. Like try again next year. I've been doing this for 5 years now. It's a hamster wheel. It's exercise. It's a very long process, but the more you do it over time, you're just gonna get better and better at it.
It is, yeah, it's,
You're not gonna get worse unless you're
well,
James Cameron or George Lucas.
James Cameron's always getting better.
And bonus tip, number 49, don't use AI in your short film.
Yeah.
Just don't. Do I even need to
You motherfucker.
add to that?
Just don't do it.
Just don't do that.
Just don't fucking do it.
Stupid. And those are my 48 tips for doing the 48-hour film festival. Wow. Didn't we learn so much?
And I was also here.
You were. Yeah. I recommend the Seattle 48-Hour Film Project so much. It is an excellent event. I recommend the AGBO competition as well. It's yearly, usually in October or September, I think now. There's so many other competitions online. Maybe I'll list some of them in the links to this video, some of the ones that we do. Yeah, I don't know, just fucking do it. Shia LaBeouf,
Like and subscribe.
do it. No, I'm not
Like and subscribe.
becoming a YouTuber. It's the one time,
Like and
maybe two
like-
time,
like
if you
and
wanna see more. Okay. And
that's
I
exactly
know.
where to end the video.